Mental health after age 60 and love walk side by side like two invisible pillars holding up life. Stories from this stage carry deep marks, memories that shaped every smile and every scar. At 68, Robert Miller believed the most intense days had already faded, leaving only the echo of old memories and a daily routine choked by silence. He saw himself trapped under the weight of past choices, especially those that hurt the people closest to him. His mind had become a battlefield. Sometimes it seemed to rise with strength, but other times guilt crushed him like invisible chains. Each memory pulled him inward, reinforcing the feeling that love and vitality had become closed chapters. This inner struggle reflected more than just regrets. It was the portrait of a man swinging between the hope of rebuilding something and the fear of facing his own flaws. Love, which could have been the key to his healing, remained distant, as if behind a door he didn't have the courage to open. Robert didn't know it, but this stage of life was about to place him before a challenge that would shake not only his mental health but also how he understood love, and the value of reconciling with the people who truly mattered. What Robert didn't realize was that life was about to put him through the hardest test, one demanding courage, compassion, and a willingness to break down the barriers built by pride. A shocking situation that would force his unforgiving wife and rejected daughter face to face, pushing him to choose between keeping the silence that consumed him or finally fighting for the love that could save the entire family. This channel is just getting started, and you can be part of this growth. Support our work so we can bring you more moving stories like Robert's. Subscribe, share with your friends, and leave a like. It makes all the difference in helping us continue this journey together. Robert had built a life of predictable routines, marked by silent dinners, church commitments, and cold glances hiding deep wounds. Diane, his wife, had always been known as a strong-willed woman, proud of her convictions, unable to admit vulnerability. When their daughter Emily became pregnant as a teenager, Diane saw only a stain on the family name, an unforgivable mistake. With the same coldness she used with neighbors and acquaintances, she turned her back on her own daughter. The words she spoke that night, "You made your choice," echoed like a hammer inside Robert, and ever since, they followed him in every gesture, in every memory. He tried to argue, but Diane's voice was sharp. Giving in to the impulse to protect Emily would mean facing a marital storm he feared he couldn't withstand. And so, silently, he swallowed the decision that would make him complicit in her rejection. Years passed, but the scene remained intact in his memory, as vivid as the day it happened. In the middle of the night, Robert would stare at the ceiling and wonder where Emily was sleeping, whether his granddaughter had a crib, whether anyone would reach out a hand when the young woman's strength ran out. That silence began to eat away at more than just his heart. It affected his mind, his stability, what he believed to be peace. Mental health, which should find balance in life's mature phase, turned into a maze of guilt. He felt as if every prayer repeated in church was a reminder of his own failure, as if every sermon about family was a direct accusation against him. He had a comfortable roof over his head, food on the table, a soft bed to rest in, but the weight of Emily's and his granddaughter's absence made everything feel empty. Sometimes he tried to convince himself that time would fix things. He told himself that one day Diane would realize her mistake, that Emily would find the strength to start over alone. But the truth haunted him in simple moments: the ticking of the clock in the living room, the smell of coffee Diane prepared without emotion, the church pews filled with whole families celebrating togetherness. Robert realized he was living in an orderly setting, but without life. The calm was only an appearance, and the love that could heal was smothered by pride and silence. Every night ended the same way. Lying in the dark, he asked himself how he could sleep peacefully knowing his granddaughter was growing up without a proper home, while he settled into a comfort that no longer made sense. It was a conflict that grew heavier with each passing year, and with every new memory, the certainty that something had to change became harder and harder to ignore. Robert's reunion with Emily hit him like a punch to the gut. He was used to the routine of church, the repeated prayers, the sermons delivered in firm tones, the hallway conversations always laced with judgment disguised as piety. Nothing seemed different that day, until his eyes landed on an image he never imagined he'd see again. Emily, the daughter he'd silently carried in his heart since her banishment, was standing there in the donation line, little hope cradled in her arms. The baby, oblivious to the weight of the moment, smiled at the lights in the hall, radiating an almost cruel innocence amid so much hardness around her. Robert felt his heart race, but he didn't have time to collect himself. Diane, standing beside her friends, delivered the sentence that sliced through the air, "Look at that, irresponsible as ever." The words were spoken quietly, but loud enough for him and others nearby to hear. It pierced Robert like a blade. He, who for years had stayed silent in the face of his wife's demands, now felt something different, a mix of shame, anger, and helplessness. How could the woman who preached compassion every Sunday speak from the pulpit about love, yet show nothing but contempt when face to face with her own daughter? Emily pretended not to hear. She clutched the supplies and hurried out, her eyes fixed on her daughter so she wouldn't give in to tears. Robert followed every movement, his throat knotted so tightly it felt like suffocation. That's when he learned about the report filed with social services. Someone, bothered by Emily's presence at the motel where she lived, decided the best course was to expose her life, as if judgment weren't already enough. When the social worker knocked on Emily's door, Robert heard about it secondhand. He imagined his daughter's panic, the sharp questions, the clinical gaze scanning every corner of the room for flaws. The scene, described to him later, stayed burned into his mind: simple clothes, makeshift diapers, bottles carefully rationed. But despite all the hardship, there was one undeniable truth: Hope was healthy, clean, and above all, deeply loved. The social worker, used to finding neglect and abandonment in similar situations, left with an unexpected note in her report: there was love here. That detail, while it didn't solve the practical problems, revealed something the critics stubbornly refused to see. For Robert, the impact was devastating. He realized his daughter was surviving purely on the strength of being a mother. With every smile from Hope, Emily found the energy to face another day. With every innocent glance from the baby, she had a reason to keep going. Robert saw, with painful clarity, that his daughter's mental health was held together solely by that bond, fragile, yet powerfully resilient. In that moment, something inside him broke. Diane's sermons, the repeated prayers, the neighbors' venomous comments, it all rang hollow. The true gospel was right there, in the arms of the rejected daughter and the smiling granddaughter. And that's when Robert finally understood what age had been quietly trying to teach him: love after 65 doesn't need speeches, it needs presence. Sometimes, all it takes is one simple gesture, like opening your arms and saying, "I'm here," to heal wounds that years of silence only deepened. Dinner seemed to follow its usual script. Diane led the table in words of gratitude, praising their son's discipline and the pride she felt in keeping the family's reputation intact. Robert listened silently, but this time, he couldn't swallow it down. The recent images kept hammering in his mind: Emily in the donation line, Hope smiling amid scarcity, the cruel whispers of judgment. The knot in his throat didn't loosen with food on his plate, nor with Diane's rehearsed phrases. And then, in a surge of courage bigger than himself, he spoke up. "Emily isn't lost. Hope isn't a mistake. They're our family." The table fell into silence. Diane dropped her fork as if she'd just heard blasphemy. The pride she'd nurtured for years trembled in the face of her husband's long-overdue courage. Robert had brought Emily home that night, after secretly seeking her out, unable to bear the distance any longer. Now, mother and daughter stood face to face, separated by old wounds, yet bound together by Hope's presence. Tears streamed quickly down Diane's face, mixing anger, shame, and the memory of her merciless decision to cast her daughter out. She wanted to respond. She wanted to get up and walk out. But her granddaughter's eyes held her in place. The baby gazed at her with quiet calm, as if her innocence were a silent invitation to forgiveness. The moment stretched out, seconds that felt like eternity, until Diane finally reached out her arms. Emily, hesitating, handed over her daughter, as if placing an entire life into judgment. And right there, the barrier built over years of rigidity began to crumble. Diane held her granddaughter close, crying, unable to say anything beyond what truly mattered. "You're going to live here. We're a family." Those words sounded like a key turning in a lock Robert believed had been sealed forever. The weight he'd carried since the day he first stayed silent started to dissolve. Emily collapsed into tears and threw herself into her father's arms. The embrace was tight, messy, full of sobs and regrets, but also relief. Robert closed his eyes for a moment, feeling that, at last, he had fulfilled the role he'd abandoned years before, protecting his own. The house, once choked by rules and judgment, took on a new sound that night. Between tears, promises, and hope's soft cries, rigidity gave way to something different: hope. It wasn't a perfect ending. Wounds still needed healing, Diane's pride wouldn't vanish overnight, and challenges still lay ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Robert knew they weren't alone anymore. This was the lesson he would carry forward: mental health after 60 isn't strengthened by silence and discipline alone. It blossoms when you allow yourself to love again, when you choose compassion over judgment. And at that dinner table, amid chaos and tears, Robert learned it's never too late to start over. Robert's life is proof that it's never too late to begin again. After 60, many believe destiny is already written, that all that's left is to follow routine in silence. But mental health at this stage doesn't thrive on old memories or perfectly arranged walls. It needs affection, connection, the courage to tear down barriers built by pride. Robert, hollowed out by guilt, found in love a remedy more powerful than any word of condemnation. Emily, once rejected, regained her strength by feeling she had a home again. Hope, who seemed destined to grow up surrounded by scorn, now slept wrapped in the care of arms that protected her. And Robert, who thought he had nothing left to give, rediscovered the value of simply being present. For him, it wasn't just about saving his daughter and granddaughter, it was about saving himself, reclaiming his own mental health, proving his heart could still bloom. That's the deepest point of this story: the mind grows old when hardened by fear, but stays alive when open to love. Every act of compassion, every hug, every word of welcome becomes nourishment, not just for the soul of the one who receives it, but for the one who offers it too. What remains is a powerful lesson: love has no age, and mental health grows stronger precisely when we choose to embrace instead of push away, to forgive instead of condemn. If this story moved you, stay with us for more like it, stories that show how, even after 60, it's possible to live fully, with a peaceful mind and a heart full of love. This channel is just getting started, and you can be part of this growth. Support our work so we can bring you more moving stories like Robert's. Subscribe, share with your friends, and leave a like. It makes all the difference in helping us continue this journey together.